Russia is massing troops and equipment. Does it portend another major offensive? Where is it going to happen, and what is Ukraine going to do about it? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's January 2nd, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, when we look at the control map, the largest change is that Russian forces have advanced somewhat into this eastern outskirts of Bakhmut. You can see we've been talking for weeks and weeks about their efforts to try to get a foothold in these industrial outskirts, and you can see they have effectively done so. This is really the only change to the map. And it's tough to say if this is part of a controlled Ukrainian withdrawal through Bakhmut. But as we talked about, once Russia established this foothold here, it was inevitable that they were going to continue to push block by block through Bakhmut. When we look at the combat map, you can see that Russian forces continue to concentrate their efforts quite heavily in the Bakhmut-Soledar axis. You can see they're trying to make advances through Klitschivka, the advance here in eastern Bakhmut in Krasnohora, attempting to circumvent Krasnohora through Blahodatne, attacking through Sako and Vanzetti, and trying even in Bilohorivka over here. And you guys can generally see that Russia has continued, as we've talked about, to disperse its forces quite a bit, including along this Crimea axis. What's most interesting to me, at least, is that Russia was engaging in a certain level of offensive operations near this town of Volodar and Mykilsky, and we haven't really seen as much of that activity lately, which itself is curious that Russia would very publicly announce that they are going to be making this push and then sort of just ignoring it. You guys can see last change to the front lines here was the 27th. And there wasn't really that much progress by any metric in this area. They've just kind of created this weird salient bump over Mykilsky, but that's really about it. When we look at War Mapper, you can see War Mapper reports only the Russian advance in the eastern part of the Bakhmut industrial zone. There's not really any other significant changes to the control situation. But what's most interesting is that reporting has increased that Russia is planning a major offensive, or possibly planning an offensive with a troop buildup in eastern Ukraine. They think it's going to be in the Luhansk region, and that Kiev thinks it will actually be an escalation on or about the anniversary of Moscow's invasion. Now, this is, of course, a sign that something is going on, right? Russian troops are being transferred there and prepared for something. And even the Institute for the Study of War agrees that an imminent Russian invasion in the coming months. Of course, the 24th, the end of this month, will be the one-year anniversary of the conflict. And it's interesting to me that you would see the Luhansk region become the focus, right? That would be effectively in the north here. You can see here is Luhansk. And it's interesting simply because this region is the one that Russia most notably lost control of. But what's also interesting is that this region favors maneuver warfare quite a bit. You can see that this is a lot of open space, a lot of dispersed towns, and it really favors a mechanized style of warfare, right? Large open spaces are devastating to dismounted infantry, but can be very, very effective for armored forces because they can move rapidly over this open terrain. And so I am intrigued that Russia would look at this particular front and believe that this is the place for it to happen. I actually think that it's more likely, perhaps, that Russia will maybe, and I'm not sure if this counts as still being Luhansk, but they may try to push up and encircle Soledar, right, and try to create this pocket around Siversk. Again, push Ukrainian forces up against the Siversky Donetsk. But it's hard to even believe that's a real credible plan simply because this river here is bordered on both sides by Ukrainian forces. So pushing Ukrainian forces into Ukrainian forces is not really much of a winning strategy. You can see we have, of course, Zaporizhzhia in the south. This would also be a good, to me, if I was Russia, a spot that I would strongly consider launching my attacks. But Russia has a problem, and that is, again, the sort of demechanization of its forces means that it doesn't really have much of an element of surprise. It has to gather its forces somewhere and then stage a significant attack. But it will be fairly obvious, especially given that Ukraine appears to have access to satellite reconnaissance and intelligence sharing with many of its allies. So it's probably part of the reason that Ukraine, one, is conducting this controlled withdrawal through Bakhmut to not pin its forces down as Russia gathers elsewhere. But it's also true that Russia has to understand that it is not going to have the element of surprise on this offensive. It simply is just not going to be able to pull a fast one, right? If large numbers of troops are gathered, again, let's just center it in Luhansk, then they're not going to magically be transported to Zaporizhzhia or to Donetsk, right? It's going to happen slowly over time. It will be obvious. And this is sort of a function of, it'll be obvious to Ukraine, who has, of course, presumably access to at least some Western intelligence. Anyway, that is all I had for you for today. As always, guys, if you want access to the combat video breakdowns, the viral videos, you know what I'm talking about, the ones that I can't show you here. Those are all on the Patreon. I'm probably actually this week going to be doing Sivdiv's full video that he recently dropped. So the one where they take on the Spetsnaz, definitely can't show that on this channel. So if you want to check that out, make sure to become a member down below. See you guys in the next one.